300 meters below the Mariana Trench, Captain William Iron Hand Carter heard something impossible. A whisper, not through the radio, not from his crew, but from the steel walls themselves. And in 72 hours, that whisper would cost him everything he believed about reality. March 1971. The USS Blackfin cut through the darkest waters on Earth, running silent, running deep. Carter stood in the control room, his weathered hands gripping the periscope housing. This wasn't a combat mission. This was something the Navy called experimental, a word that always made his jaw tighten. "Depth at 350 meters, Captain," Lieutenant Hayes reported, his voice steady, but his knuckles white on the console. Carter nodded. The Blackfin was designed for 600 meters maximum. They were already pushing into waters that made the hull creak like an old man's bones. But Washington wanted data. They always wanted data. "Level off here," Carter ordered. "All stop." The engines fell silent. In a submarine, silence is never truly silent. There's always the hum of life support, the distant ping of sonar, the breathing of 50 men packed into a steel tube. But this silence felt different, heavier. Sonar technician Rodriguez suddenly jerked upright at his station. "Contact, sir. Bearing 270. Range unknown." "Unknown?" Carter moved behind him. "What do you mean, unknown?" Rodriguez's hands trembled slightly over the controls. "The signature doesn't match anything in our database. It's not mechanical. It's almost like—" He paused, searching for words. "Like breathing, sir." Carter felt the temperature in the control room drop. Not literally, but every submariner knows that feeling when the ocean decides to remind you who's really in charge. "Probably a whale," Chief Petty Officer Morrison suggested, but his tone lacked conviction. "At this depth?" Hayes shook his head. "Nothing biological survives down here." Carter was about to respond when he heard it. A whisper. Soft, barely audible, like someone speaking just behind his ear. He spun around. Nobody was there. "Did anyone else—" he started. "I heard it," Rodriguez said immediately, his face pale. "Someone said my name." The control room erupted in nervous murmurs. Carter raised his hand for silence. "Pressure, hallucinations. We've been down here for 6 hours. The human mind plays tricks at this depth. That's exactly what we're here to study." But Carter didn't believe his own words. In 30 years of submarine service, through 2 wars and countless deep dives, he'd never heard his own name whispered by the darkness. Over the next 12 hours, the whispers grew stronger, not louder. Stronger, as if they were becoming more real. Ensign Parker reported seeing a figure in the aft torpedo room. "A woman in a white dress, sir. She was just standing there, staring at the warheads." "There are no women on this boat, Parker." "I know what I saw, Captain." Then, Morrison claimed he saw his dead brother walking through the galley. Rodriguez swore someone was hiding in the oxygen tanks. By hour 24, Carter had 17 reports of the same hallucination, a pale figure in outdated naval uniform moving through the walls. Carter called his senior staff to the wardroom. Hayes, Morrison, Rodriguez, and Doc Fleming, the ship's medical officer. "Talk to me, Doc," Carter said. "What's happening to my crew?" Fleming removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly. "Pressure psychosis. At this depth, nitrogen narcosis combines with confined space stress. The brain starts filling in gaps with false information. It's textbook. Textbook doesn't explain why they're all seeing the same thing," Hayes pointed out. "Shared delusion," Fleming countered. One man describes what he saw, others unconsciously adopt the same imagery. It's a documented phenomenon. "Then explain this," Morrison said, sliding a photograph across the table. It was from the hull inspection camera, taken an hour ago. In the grainy image, pressed against the exterior hull, was a handprint, a human handprint, at 350 meters below sea level. The room fell silent. Carter studied the photo. The pressure at this depth would crush a human body instantly, completely. Nothing could survive outside the hull. Nothing. "Camera malfunction," he said finally. "Log it and move on." But that night, alone in his quarters, Carter heard the whisper again. This time, it formed words. "William." You know what you did." His blood ran cold. Nobody on this boat called him William. His crew called him Captain or Sir. His friends from the war called him Iron Hand. But his mother had called him William, and she'd been dead for 15 years. Carter didn't sleep. Instead, he pulled out the classified mission briefing he'd received before departure. The real one, not the experimental deep dive cover story. The Blackfin was searching for something. A Soviet submarine that had vanished in these waters 6 months ago. The Kursk 7. Intelligence suggested it had imploded at depth, but Moscow denied it ever existed. Washington wanted proof. They wanted Carter to find the wreckage. What they didn't tell him was why the Kursk 7 had been down here in the first place, or what it had been carrying. By hour 48, the situation deteriorated rapidly. 3 crew members refused to leave their bunks, claiming the walls were watching them. Parker locked himself in the head, screaming about drowning. Rodriguez stopped monitoring sonar entirely, just sat at his station whispering numbers in Russian. Russian. He didn't speak Russian. "Captain, we need to surface," Hayes urged. "The crew is falling apart." Carter wanted to agree. Every instinct screamed to blow ballast and run for daylight. But something held him back. A feeling, like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that one more step would reveal something terrible and true. 6 more hours, Carter said. "We complete the search grid, then we surface." "Sir, with respect, 6 hours, Lieutenant." Hayes's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Carter saw the doubt in his eyes, the fear, and something else, something that looked like pity. Hour 52. Carter was in the sonar room when Rodriguez suddenly sat upright, fully lucid for the first time in a day. "I found it," he said calmly. "The Kursk. Bearing 090, range 800 meters. She's intact, sir, not imploded, just sitting there." Carter's heart hammered against his ribs. "You're certain?" "Her reactor is still running. I can hear the coolant pumps." "Captain," Rodriguez turned to face him. "There are people moving inside." "Impossible. Even if the Kursk hadn't imploded, her crew would have suffocated months ago. No submarine carried 6 months of life support." "Take us closer." Silent approach. The Blackfin crept forward through the absolute darkness. At 400 meters, the hull began protesting with sharp, metallic groans. At 450, the lights flickered. At 480, they saw her. The Kursk 7 sat on the ocean floor like a cathedral of the damned. Her hull was pristine. No damage, no implosion scars. Her running lights were on, glowing a sickly green in the abyss. And through the thick observation windows of her conning tower, Carter saw movement, figures, human shapes, moving with purpose. "Sir," Hayes whispered, "that's not possible." Carter raised the periscope to maximum magnification. Through the Kursk's windows, he saw them clearly now. Soviet sailors moving through the control room, checking instruments, drinking coffee. Alive, after 6 months, at crushed depth. And then one of them turned toward Bard the Blackfin, looked directly at the periscope, smiled. Carter's hands went numb, because he recognized that face. Lieutenant Commander Dmitry Volkov. They'd met during a joint NATO exercise in '68. Volkov had seemed like a good man, professional, respectful. Volkov had died in a training accident in 1969. Carter had read the obituary himself. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Rodriguez said, his voice hollow. "Audio only. Russian Navy frequency." "Put it on speaker." Static filled the control room. Then, through the hiss and crackle, a voice. Calm, almost friendly. "USS Blackfin. This is Kursk 7. Welcome to the deep place, Captain Carter. We've been waiting for you." Morrison crossed himself. Hayes gripped the ballast control like a lifeline. Carter's mouth had gone dry. "This is Captain Carter. Identify yourself and state your situation." Laughter, cold and distant. "Our situation? We're home, Captain. The question is, what is yours? You're 480 meters below crush depth. Your crew should be dead." "Dead? No, Captain. We're more alive than we've ever been. The pressure down here doesn't crush you. It opens you, makes you see what's really there, what's always been there, hiding in the spaces between the steel and the sea." Carter's finger hovered over the radio cut-off switch. "You're experiencing pressure psychosis. We can assist with—" "We're not the ones who are sick, William." The use of his first name made Carter's blood freeze. "Your crew sees us now too, don't they?" the voice continued. "Walking through your boat, whispering your secrets. That's because the barrier is thin here. The deep place wants to be known, and you brought 50 minds to feed it." "Cut transmission," Carter ordered. Rodriguez's hand moved to comply, but the voice continued. "Do you want to know what really happened to us, Captain? We found something down here, an opening. Not in the ocean floor, in reality itself. And when we looked inside, it looked back. It's still looking at you, at your crew, through you." Carter slammed his fist on the radio console, cutting the feed manually. The control room plunged into terrible silence. "Captain," Hayes said carefully, "we need to leave. Now." Carter knew he was right, but as he gave the order to blow ballast, Rodriguez screamed. "They're coming! Sonar shows multiple contacts, closing fast, dozens of them. Classify those contacts." I can't. They're not mechanical. They're not biological. Captain, they're just there." Through the periscope, Carter watched in horror as the Kursk 7's hatches opened. Figures emerged, walking along the hull as if the crushing pressure and freezing water were nothing but air. They moved toward the black fin with terrible purpose. "Emergency. Blow! All ballast tanks, get us out of here!" The submarine lurched upward, groaning under the strain. 200 meters, 150, 100. But the whispers followed them, growing louder with every meter they climbed, not just in Carter's ears now, but in his mind, in his bones. "William, you can't run from what you are, from what you've done." 50 meters, daylight was a distant promise above them, and then the engines died. "Engineering reports total power failure," Morrison shouted. "Backup systems not responding." They were dead in the water, suspended between the surface and the abyss, between the world of men and whatever lay below. Carter stood frozen, watching his crew dissolve into panic around him, and in that moment of absolute terror, he understood. The whispers weren't external. They were internal. The deep place didn't exist in the ocean. It existed in the mind, in guilt, in fear, in every secret thing a man tries to drown in darkness. "All hands," Carter said into the ship-wide intercom. His voice was steady. Iron Hand Carter, making his final stand. "Listen to me. What you're seeing isn't real. It's us. Our own pressure, our own depth. But we're submariners. We live in pressure. We master it. Look at each other. Look at something real." Slowly, the panic subsided. Crew members grabbed each other, held on to tangible things. The whispers began to fade. Carter closed his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mother, for not being there. For choosing the Navy over you, I'm sorry." The confession echoed through the empty control room. When he opened his eyes, the lights flickered once, then blazed to full power. "Engine restart, successful," Morrison called out. "All systems responding." They surfaced 12 minutes later into blinding sunlight. Carter ordered full speed toward Pearl Harbor. Nobody spoke about what happened below. The official report would call it pressure-related hallucinations and recommend depth limit restrictions. But Carter knew differently. 3 days after docking, he received a classified message. The Kursk 7 had been found by a Soviet recovery team. Her hull was crushed like a tin can. She'd imploded 6 months ago, taking all hands. There were no survivors, no running lights, no intact control room. Whatever Carter had seen at the bottom of the trench wasn't the Kursk 7. It was something wearing her shape, something that lived in the pressure, in the guilt, in the deep places of the human mind where light never reaches. Captain William "Iron Hand" Carter retired 6 months later. He never explained why, but sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and the weight of memory pressed down like 400 meters of dark water, he still heard them. The whispers, calling him home to the deep place, where the pressure opens you and makes you see what's really there.